So, as I said, today we'll be we're going to start off in Colossians chapter 3, verse 15. And that verse reads, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you are called in one body, and be thankful." And just as a neat little thing, and I've spent the past couple of weeks, but today I actually remembered to write it down when it was in my head so I could tell you about it. The music that Kim's been choosing has lined up with what I've been planning to teach on, and I'm not planning with her. I'm not telling her this is what I'm doing next week. Like, doing it as well. If you don't know the story behind that song, the guy that wrote it originally, he got a telegram that his whole family, his wife and his kids, had just died, I believe, in a boat crossing the sea. And as you can imagine, that would be a tragic, horrific event, something to find out about. And for most people, that's plenty to make them, question their faith. And what did he do? He wrote a song that said, "It is well with my soul. When peace like a river attendeth my way." And sometimes we think about like having the peace of God, and we think, oh yeah, just things don't bother me. Life will be smooth and easy. And that's not at all what he's talking about. He's talking about you just found out your entire family died away from you, and rather than becoming a horrible wreck and abandoning your faith and you're cursing God, you have peace about it. Or with one of my favorite guys to share about, Dr. Livingstone, who was separated from his wife for so many years while he was on the mission field in Africa, was mauled by a lion and lost an eye to a thorny branch that got slapped him in the face. And he was a Scottish guy living in Africa. So, just the problems that, being a fair-skinned Scottish man in the African desert would face. When the first time his wife saw him after she went away from him for a few years, she almost didn't recognize him. And finally, their kids are old enough that they can come and be with them, or that she can come and spend some time with them. And what happens? She gets sick and dies in a month. This is a man who dedicated his life to God, and you'd think, well, if anyone's going to have the peace of God, it's this guy. And he did. He wasn't shielded from terrible events. He wasn't shielded from the problems of this life, but he was shielded from the stress. I'm guaranteed, yes, he mourned his wife, as anybody would. But at her graveside, he rededicated himself to the service of God. So when it says, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts," hopefully we never find ourselves in that position where we have some horrendous tragedy befall us that we need the peace of God to keep us going. But that's the power of the peace of God. That's what we're looking at. We're called to let the peace of God rule in our hearts. That's an important word there, let. Because if something bad happens in my life, I can say, you know what, I'm giving this to you, God. Lord, I pray that you would carry me through this, make this work out, and I'm giving it to you. I'm not going to worry anymore. And walk away and say, all right, now what do I got to do? How am I going to fix this? What am I? And immediately pick it right back up and push the peace of God out again. I have to let the peace of God rule in my heart. And as we look around the world, it's definitely important for us to allow the peace of God to rule in our hearts right now, because there's so many things that we could be stressed out about, so many things that we could worry about. So we can be thankful for the peace of God. But just like last week, it comes with expectations. It comes with guidelines for us to follow. And starting off in verse 1, it says, If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God." So where is Christ right now? He's not in a grave somewhere in Israel. He's not somewhere else wandering around, doing miracles or showing himself to people. He's not appearing in tortillas. He's in heaven at the right hand of God. We need to set our mind on things above, not on things of the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Set your mind on things above. This last election season, just like the one before it, and the one before it, and the one before it, and the one before it, was a very divisive time. It's a time when we can easily have gotten wrapped up and said, if you don't vote like me, then you're not really a Christian. If you don't vote like me, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And you could see that in the church. I mean, there's people in the Christian church here in America that are so hard up, sold out for politics, that they will disown you and refuse to talk to you if you differ on them in something that doesn't even show up in the Bible. When we see division like that, especially when we see division like that hit the church, it's because we're focused on things of the earth, not the things of above. I died. If you're saved, you died and were raised with Christ. That means everything that I was about before, it's been replaced with what Jesus is about. In the previous chapter, Colossians 2, he tells us that, therefore, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourselves to regulations? Do not touch, do not taste, do not handle, which all concern things which perish with the using, according to the commandments and doctrines of men. These things indeed have an appearance of wisdom and self-imposed religion, false humility and neglect of the body, but are of no value against the indulgence of the flesh. If our flesh died, if we died with Christ, then why do we still subject ourselves to the rules that were based off of the flesh? And he says commandments and doctrines of men, because if you read through the laws we have been, and you compare that with kosher law, you'll note that one of those is a lot more strict and longer than the other. They've created a whole bunch of laws, and that's not like a knock against the Jewish people, because they're people. They did what people do. We see what God says, we say, all right, I like that, but I got to add my own little touch to it. And we add stuff until everything's precisely how we want it to be, and we can say, well, you're not doing that, so you got to get out. Well, it's like with in the military, your master gunnery sergeant will say, all right, guys, here's your safety brief for the weekend. Don't drink and drive. Don't do anything dumb. Be safe. Come back on Monday. And you're like, all right, cool. We got the rules. And then Gunny comes up and says, just to add on to that. And now you got a whole another hour of formation before you're free for the weekend. We all got to add our own little touch. God gave us what we need to know. We need to stick to that. So if we died with Christ, as he says, well, then we were raised with Christ, as we read in chapter 3. So why are we then still worrying about worldly things? Why am I worried about who's president, who's, what's going on over here, how much money I have, what kind of car I'm driving? Why am I not focused upwards? Why am I not looking to heaven? Think on Jesus in heaven, and nothing else will matter, because Jesus will provide your needs, and he will guide you to where you need to be and what you need to do. He gives us hope. If I look at the world around me, I'm going to be hopeless. Because there is no hope in this world. No matter how much hope we put into a particular person on either side of the aisle, or a particular thing, whatever, it's human. It's fallen. It will fail you. And Demon Hunter has a song called I Will Fail You, and I love that song because it's so easy for me to look at them and their lyrics and be like, oh, they're so great. I need to do everything from them, and then they're like, just remember, I'm human, I will fail you. We'll look at pastors, especially pastors of big, huge churches, like, oh, he knows what's up. And we find out that he's got some scandal in the background, and we go, oh, And if our focus is on that man instead of on God, we have no hope. Where do we find our hope? By focusing on heaven, the things of Christ. So we can give thanks that we have a hope. So therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth. Which I always love, put therefore. What does it mean? It means because of this, do this. Because we died and were raised with Christ, put to death your members which are on the earth. Fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourself once walked when you lived in them. And because of what we just read, because we have been raised in Christ, because we live in Him, we need to focus on Him and put to death all forms of sexual immorality and idolatry. Because anything that we put ahead of Christ becomes an idol. If I say I need to, bend the rules just a little bit so I can make this extra money at my job, well, I've just made that extra money an idol because Christ doesn't tell us to bend the rules. He tells us to obey the rules. If I'm willing to disown somebody because we have a disagreement on something, I've put that something, unless, obviously there are exceptions. If they say that they're a believer and they keep on doing all the evil things that they're not supposed to be doing, we're told to let that person go, to turn them over to the devil even, so that their flesh may be destroyed, but their soul may be saved. But if, I say that Chevy's great and you say that Ford's great, and I say, well, I don't like you anymore. Well, I've just made Chevy an idol. If I'm hateful, then I've made my own desires, my own whatever, an idol above God. And if you continue to live in sexual immorality, whatever form it is, you've made that an idol in place of God. That's why he uses such strong language. He says, put to death. We're going to look at another list. He says, put away. But here he says, put to death. It's a bit stronger. If I put the dog away, I can get the dog back out again. The dog is still there. But if I kill the dog, there's no more dog. So put to death sexual immorality, put to death idolatry, focus on God. Because before we came to Christ, we walked in those things, we lived in those things. And as a result, we were subject to God's wrath. And none of us want to be subject to anybody's wrath, but if there's anybody whose wrath you should avoid, it is God. But if we're saved, then you've died and you've been lifted out of that swamp. You're no longer living in that. You're no longer in that filth. You have a different option. You have a better choice now. So we can give thanks that we've been raised to new life. Now here he tells us to put off all of these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you've put off the old man and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge, according to the image of him who created him, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. So he gives us a list there of things that we need to avoid, the things that we need to put away, get away from them. The first one is anger. And you say, well, he said anger and wrath. Isn't that like the same thing? Sort of, but not really. It's actually really interesting to me when I looked up the actual Greek for both of these two words. What is anger? It is indignation. It's agitation of the soul. When you're just, anything that somebody does just annoys you. And you're like, ugh, just indignant all the time. Just whatever they do, you just, this person. Can you believe this? Everything's an offense to you. Your soul is agitated. If your soul is agitated, that's a bit deeper than just the flesh, the skin. That's at the center of your being. You're just an agitated person. It's who you are. We don't want to be that person. The word and the really like picturesque part I got of it was the word that it comes from. It's etymology. It comes from a root meaning to teem, as in a plant or fruit bursting with juice. Like when you've got a really ripe aloe vera plant and you nick it and the aloe vera juice just flows out of it, or a tomato or whatever fruit, it's so juicy you cut it and it just juice is flowing out of it. Any little bump, its juice comes out of it. That's what this is talking about. Any little bump, your anger comes out of you. Any little nick, any little bruise, you're just angry about it. We need to put that away. We need to put that off. We're not called to be angry people. The Bible tells us we can be angry and not sin. This is the type of anger that is a sin. Because Jesus got angry. Jesus got angry and he flipped tables and he made a whip. But he wasn't an angry person. Like, he had many offenses against him while he was walking this earth, and he didn't lash out really at any of them except for really that one time. And then when he told the people all their sins so they'd leave the woman caught in adultery alone. It's not that he excused her sin, it's that he's pointing out their hypocrisy. They grabbed her, but not the guy who obviously was there with her. And then wrath. Wrath is more like a hot, fiery passion. It's like when you're driving your car and somebody cuts you off and you cuss them out real fast, then you go, my bad, I should have done that. There's that quick anger that just rises up and quickly dissolves. We don't want that either. So you don't want to be the guy who's just always dwelling on their anger, just walk around muttering, like, all the comedians always joke about the old married couple and the man's 10 feet back, angry and muttering under his breath the whole time. You don't want to be that guy. And you don't want to be the guy that is angry at his wife and just starts yelling at her and then comes back and apologizes later. Apologize later, but don't yell at her. Control your emotions. Control your reactions. Now, James tells us about the tongue being the most powerful member of the body. It's like the rudder of a ship. It's small, but it can steer the direction which the ship goes. And you say, well, I can't control my tongue like that. So I get angry, I'll just say stuff. It's like, well, God tells us to control your tongue. So obviously it is possible. We need to, if we're going to let the peace of God rule in us, it'll help us to keep us more even. And it'll guide us so that way, when there is something to actually be angry about, we'll know and we'll have a righteous anger rather than the anger that we already have. He says malice. The word malice, we all know what that means. But it goes beyond just like I want bad things to happen or I want to do bad things. It's a desire to injure someone. It's malignity, ill will, and a desire to injure. Like, when you think of Jesus, do you think of a guy who walked around as wanting to punch someone? Hoping that he had a chance to pull out his gun so that he could, show them why they don't mess with me? No. He had no desire to injure. He had no desire to show off his toughness, to show off, how manly he was, at least in the typical macho way. He had a desire to heal, to be good to people, and to teach and to show them the right way. And if my reaction is to come up and kick you in the shin every time you do something wrong, you're probably not going to learn anything from me. You're going to stay away from me. We shouldn't be people that people have to fear. Even though Jesus was God and did great miracles and said things that went contrary to what most of these people believed, because they'd been brought up in the Jewish tradition that denied that he was the Messiah, people were drawn to him because of his nature, because he was the opposite of malice. He says blasphemy, to put off blasphemy. And The instant thing I think of every time I see the word blasphemy is to take the Lord's name in vain, to speak badly of God, to deny who God is. And yes, that's an obvious one. We shouldn't do that. But more than that, or along with that, it's not just reproachful speech injurious to divine majesty. Had to get in the smart definition there. But it also refers here to slander, detraction, speech injurious to another's good name. So if I'm going around telling people what an idiot that guy is, that's blasphemy that I'm not supposed to do. If my mouth is nothing but evil and gossip, lies, slander, I'm not living up to what I've been called to. There's 2 songs that pop into my head that talk about that. One of them being Demon Hunter. He says your mouth is an open grave, because nothing but death comes out of it if you're living according to the world, if you're not listening to this. But also our favorite Screamy guys. Their song Mouth Like a Magazine. I can't remember the band name though. Showbread. Talks about if you're doing nothing but gossiping and talking about people and slandering people, what are magazines usually? You think of People Magazine, Us Magazine. These are all gossip magazines. It's all just talking about other people's lives. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be spreading potential lies about people. If somebody is truly messing up, if somebody is doing something bad, then you talk to that person about it. You go to them and say, hey, this isn't right. You need to do better. You need to get the way you're supposed to be. You don't go and say, hey, this person over there, you know what they're doing? Because that doesn't help the person. That just helps you to feel superior. And that's not what we're called to. We're going to hit that in the next passage. But he also says filthy language. What is filthy language? It is foul speaking, low and obscene speech, shameful speaking. If you're about to say something, you got to look around and go, yeah, so anyways, don't say that thing. Whether it's about to say something bad about somebody or you just don't want people to hear you use the language that you're about to use. That would fit in there. We need to be careful of that because that's one that the world is very good at trying to move the bar on us. That way we think, oh, this is fine and everybody else is doing it. But it's not fine. POD was a band that started off talking about, with a song that was literally titled Abortion is Murder. And they would sing straight quotations out of the Bible. And at the feet of Jesus, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Then went on to 10 years later, a few albums later, just outright saying the F word. And then when Christian stores said, we're not going to carry that album, and people called them out on it and said, that's not right. They said, oh, no, we're just trying to meet people where they are. We're just trying to, meet, that's how the language that they use, and we're just trying to meet them where they are so they feel comfortable. And they tried to justify it saying that, Jesus didn't, stay away from the sinners, and that's what they're doing. But Jesus didn't lower himself to the level of the sinners either. Jesus stayed Jesus and drew people to him because of who he was. And so it's important that we don't compromise ourselves. And if we are compromised, that we eliminate that compromise. Because at work, I know that if I let my guard down and I start making the same jokes that they do, then when I try and tell them about Jesus, they're going to be like, eh. And there was one guy that I used to work with, he since moved on to a different job, that I thought was always looked at as, a great example. And he was also Christian, and when they started telling dirty jokes, he'd just be like, all right, dude, and just leave. But he got his point across without even having to, call him out on it. He would just, as soon as their conversation went south, he left. And he was a popular guy, one of the more loved guys, and always laughing, having a good time, joking with everyone. But as soon as it went the wrong way, he's like, peace. And that's something I've been working on trying to do. And how are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to manage to put away all these things that are come so naturally to us, so easily? It's because we are renewed. We can put off the old man and put on the new man. If I put on that new man is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. The meaning of that is Adam is the old man. Adam was created in the image of God. But Adam screwed up. He sinned and brought sin to the whole world. Who is the new man? The new man is Jesus. Jesus is referred to frequently as the second Adam. Through one man, death entered the world, and through the second Adam, life. You can argue about who you think the second Adam is, but there's only one man through whom life entered this world, and that's Jesus. So we need to put off Adam, the one through whom that brought death, and put on life, Jesus. Because in Jesus there is no division. In Jesus there is no American, French, Scythian, barbarian, whatever. We are all one family. We're all one unit. We are all Jesus' church. We're his children, or God's children. The old man is self-centered. That's why Adam gave in to sin. The thought of, being able to have this extra knowledge to be one step closer to God, that's appealing to mankind. That's why we do so much to try to make ourselves God. The new man considers others. The new man came down here and died on the cross so that we could have life. The new man isn't worried about trying to fit in with everybody. He's trying to fit in with the Father. We need to be trying to fit in with the Father. So we can give thanks that we have a blueprint and an example. And he goes on and says, therefore, because you have the new man who is in the image of him who created him, because we have the new man who is in the image of Christ, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. So, we just saw all the things we need to put off. And there's the first thing we need to put on, because apparently I forgot to put that verse on. So put on tender mercies. What is that? It's a heart of compassion. It's kind of the opposite of malice and anger and wrath. Brandon Heath has a really great song, Give Me Your Eyes. It says, give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your arms. So, basically saying, so I can see people the way you see people, so I can reach people for you. We need to put on a heart of compassion, because that's what Jesus has. That's what the Father has. That's what God has. He's righteous and he's holy and he's pure and he's just. But he has a heart of compassion, or else we wouldn't have a path to salvation. Because his righteousness doesn't mean that we need any means to be saved. It's his love and his compassion that gave us a means to be saved. And if he reached down for us, then we should be reaching out to others. And as we stopped for breakfast at McDonald's this morning, and as we're going along, I look over to the right-hand side of the street, and there was a homeless person sleeping on the asphalt, well, not asphalt, the concrete sidewalk in front of a building, and I was like, oh, that sucks. And then we pulled into McDonald's, another guy leaned up against the building, and then there's somebody else sleeping on the sidewalk over by the Cold Stone. And it's easy for us to get hardened. Like we see homeless people everywhere, and we say, oh, they stinking homeless people. They're coming around here, they're making a mess, they're making stuff look bad, and that's not how we're supposed to see them. I saw them, and I was just like, I can't imagine, like he was sprawled out, just out. I can't imagine being to the point where you could just be sprawled out on cold concrete and manage to sleep. And who knows, maybe he wasn't able to sleep, he was just hoping to. But if we put on a tender mercy, if we put on that heart of compassion, we see that and it hurts us a little bit. We want to try and do something for them. And Joel and I often discuss, if we ever win the Powerball lottery, which is going to be really hard to do when we don't buy tickets for it. But if we ever had the money for it, we would love to try and build like some kind of a compound to give them a place to be and to help get them back on their feet. But tender mercies, just we need to look at people the way that God looks at people. And when God sees people in that situation, it breaks his heart. And people say, well, why doesn't he fix that then? Well, because we've made our choices. We chose sin way back in the garden, and this world is now fallen. We live with the consequences of it. We have free will. But one thing that any of us can do, that doesn't cost any money, it's the beauty of it, share the gospel with them. Tell them about Jesus. Because it may not change their situation now, but it'll change the situation where it matters. Kindness is benignity, which is a word I've never heard before until I looked this word up. It means the condition of being benign, kind, nice, moral goodness. Kind of fits in with that heart of compassion. It means that when I see wrong, I recognize it. And I want to help to make that wrong not wrong. I want to make it right. I want to fix the problem. I want to do something about it. But just to keep us, humble is humility. Or once we put on our moral goodness, we need to put on a deep sense of our own moral littleness. Because it's easy for us to, look out and see the homeless and do stuff to help them and say, yeah, I'm pretty awesome. I am pretty good. I've got the moral high ground. Maybe I don't actually really need God because I'm doing pretty good on my own. So we need to remember, no, I definitely need God. I'm not doing pretty good on my own. And then meekness is gentleness. It's not necessarily, the person who sits in the corner, all quiet and never says anything to anyone because they're too scared. But it's the person who's gentle, who is kind, who is easygoing, who also uses the word mildness. If we're offensive to people, we will offend people. And if we offend people, they don't want to listen to us. When we see political arguments, people say, well, if you vote this, then you're evil. Then you're an idiot. You're a moron. And who's going to listen to you if that's your answer? But if you talk to people, if I come up to somebody and I don't just immediately launch into, you're an evil sinner and you're going to hell, that may be the truth. But who's going to listen to that? Who's going to want to hear anything unless God just gives you that perfect person who that's exactly what they need to hear? Most people don't want to hear that. Most people are going to be like, who do you think you are to judge me? But if you come to them and you give them the gospel and love, they're a lot more likely to listen to you. That's why Westboro Baptist Church probably doesn't have very many converts. It's all family there. Because there are other guys that go stand out in front of veterans' funerals and hold signs saying God hates the gays, but not quite so nicely, and screams about how it's that guy's fault that America is not falling down, or that guy died because America is fallen. There's not a whole lot of people lining up to join that church. We need to be meek. We need to be gentle, kind, loving, merciful, compassionate. And perhaps one of the most difficult ones for us is long-suffering. And we went over this word last week too, but it's here again because it's important. It's an important one for us, and it's a difficult one for us. And so God is going to tell us repeatedly, be patient. Have long-suffering. It's patience, forbearance, slowness in avenging wrong. It means if somebody is going too slow in front of me, I should just calm right down. If they are doing something that I don't like, if they do something, like if they, stab me in the back, then I shouldn't wait until I have a perfect moment to get back at them. I should say, you know what? God will handle this. And what does God say? Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So I should just let him handle it because he'll do it a lot better than me. And if I seek vengeance, and especially if I seek vengeance and get caught, however I'm seeking vengeance, whether it's legal or illegal, what's that do to my witness? People will say, well, he's a jerk. Look at this scheming way that he was trying to get back at this person. Nobody's want to listen to me when I try and give them the gospel. Forbearance is just tolerance, dealing with it. In the Marine Corps, if somebody complained about something, you'd say, here's a straw, suck it up. Well, that's what God's telling us. You got a problem with somebody, suck it up. Be long-suffering, be patient. Let me handle it. It says, bearing with one another. Means forbearing or enduring. Don't worry about fixing the songs. They're all going to not stay. It's fine. Bearing with one another is forbearing and enduring. That's one that I really like because a lot of times we say, well, I like this person. I'll deal with them. I'll put up with them. If they do something that I don't like, I'll give them patience. I'll give them kindness because I like them. Well, you don't have to be told to bear with or to endure somebody that you like. This is telling you, deal with it even with those people that you don't like. And if you've been to school or worked a job with other people, I guarantee you could think of somebody who just rubbed you the wrong way. You just didn't like that guy, you don't like that person, and they probably deserved every evil thought you had about them. You shouldn't have had them. Because God tells us not to, but maybe every thought you had about that person was correct. They really were just an evil, conniving, sneaky, stab you in the back snake, and you knew it, and you made sure everybody else knew it, and you wanted to make sure that you were protected, and you got them before they got you. Well, that's what God says. Bear with that person. Endure that person. If that person's a sneaky snake, and they want to try and bite you, they want to try and stab you in the back, you know what's going to happen? If God allows it, they'll do it. If God doesn't allow it, they won't. So, if I'm following this, if I'm living this, then when it comes time and I got to deal with that person, I'm not going to seek how can I get them back? How can I get them? I might be smart and still take precautions to cover myself, to protect myself, but I'm not going to look for ways that I can get that person. And then God will either allow them to get me or he won't. And if he allows them to enact their evil plan against me, then he's going to work it out for my best. Maybe he allows that to happen so that he can expose that person for who they are, because you've been living your life the way you're supposed to. You've been living how God has called us to. You're meek. You have a heart of compassion. You're kind. You're humble. You have been living without even the appearance of evil. You've been living a life above reproach so that nobody can look at you and say, yeah, I believe that he'd do that. And then this sneaky person, the snake, this backstabber comes up and says, yeah, here's what they've been doing. And everybody goes, no, they're not. Are you crazy? Hey, you know them? And now that person's exposed for who they really are. And you're protected because God protected you. Or maybe it works because they're in tight with the boss and the boss says, yeah, I believe you. Or yeah, I know they're not like that, but I don't care. We can get them for it. But you're still kind to that person. You're still loving and you're still meek. You're still humble. You don't seek your vengeance. You endure that person, even so. And now that person's like, I've been crushing your lunch every day. Why have you not struck back at me? Why aren't you coming back trying to get me? And now that person gets saved. Because you never know. That was a story for Bill. The guy, he was mean to this guy every single day. And every single day, the guy just took it. And eventually he's like, what gives? And the guy said, this gives. It's God. And he went on to become a great man of God and a pastor and a huge influence on all of us. You never know what your good witness, your forbearance is going to do. We might find ourselves, I don't know if that guy ever even knew who Bill became later. But you might find yourself being that guy who gets somebody saved who goes on to do great things. Or you must get that guy saved and he's, just raises a family that's godly. In either case, that's at least one more soul that's not going to hell. I've seen people talk about Jesus, and when we talk about how Jesus was kind, and then Jesus says to turn the other cheek, they say, oh, that's weak, that's nonsense, you don't do that. If somebody, and this is from Christians, like Christian men, like you can't be weak like that, turn the other cheek, not strike back. No, Jesus said, take your sword out there when you go, because you got to defend yourself, you got to fight back. Well, okay, that's not what he meant. He had a very specific meaning, and what did Jesus do when he was in that situation? When they cut off a dude's ear when they came to arrest him to put him on the cross, he healed that man. When they beat him and spit on him and called him names, what did he do? Nothing. When he was on the cross, he could have called down a legion of angels to just lay waste to all of his enemies. He could have just got himself off the cross and laid waste to all of his enemies. And what did Jesus do? He was meek. He was humble. He knew what he had to do, and he did it. This is what I'm saying. When we get focused on the things of this world, we get off track from what God has called us to. If somebody would say that to be like Jesus is weak, do you know how hard it is to not reach out and slap someone when they really deserve it? That takes strength to restrain yourself to not do the thing that your flesh is screaming at you to do. That's why he gives us all this, why he tells us all these things that we need to be like, because we'll twist it. We'll say, yeah, get your sword. Obviously that means, concealed carry, bring a gun with me everywhere I go, just in case somebody tries to tell me that I can't worship God here. I can shoot him in the kneecap and show them who's really boss. That, by the way, is not even remotely true. That's not how we're called to live. If someone says you can't worship God, you continue to worship God. You don't strike out at them. You just continue to worship God. He says, above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. The word used there for love is agape. So it's not just like, almost everybody in here is my family, and I love all of you. That's good. I should have that love for my family and my friends and the people who are close to me. I should definitely put that on. But agape love is the love that God has. There's no conditions on it. Even when you're an evil sinner, you're his enemy. He loves you. Because he's righteous, he's not going to just let you into heaven unless you are saved, but he still loves you. Agape is love for all. And that's a really difficult love to have. It's easy to love the people that you like. It's really difficult to love the people that you dislike. But Jesus demonstrates that for us. The way he lived his life, and in all the instructions Paul just gave us, he demonstrates for us what agape love is. So we can give thanks that we have a God who demonstrates agape love for us. Excuse me. And finally, let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which you also were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. So if I do all the things that Paul told me to do and stop doing all the things he told me not to do, it's a lot of work. That goes against everything that I am, everything that the flesh tells me to be. But what's my reward? Then the peace of God will be available to me. And if I'm doing all those things, chances are I'm going to let the peace of God rule in my heart, because I'll have no reason not to. We're all called in one body. And usually, a body's at peace with itself. If the body's attacking itself, that means that there's something wrong in the body. If that'd be like an autoimmune disorder or inflammation or something, is when your body's attacking itself. But a body that is working properly is united. It's working together for one goal. And our goal is what? To bring about God's kingdom, to bring more people into God's kingdom. When we're not united, when we're not working together towards a common goal, that means that we're focused on something other than Jesus. It means that, we've been tripped up by the news media to hate each other because I voted for this person and you voted for that person, so obviously we can't be friends. It's because we've been told that we can't get along because we're from different countries or different races or different creeds or whatever we are, whatever difference is there, it's not enough to overcome our commonality, which is Jesus. Unless we let it. It says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom. How do you do that? Well, you read it. You take it inside of you. You can't. The word of Christ can't live in you if it's outside of you. You need to read it. You need to commit it to memory. You need to study it. You need to understand it. Because the word is the word of Christ, and it leads you to wisdom. It is wisdom. And it says to teach and admonish each other in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. So when we get together for praise and for worship, that's biblical too. That's not just like, let's sing some pretty songs, but if we're singing spiritual songs, we're singing psalms and hymns, we're singing songs that bring glory to God, that teach us of who he is and his person. And it says, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God through him. We learned before about when you work is unto Jesus. Work is unto God, not to your boss. You're not working for the guy that pays you. You're working for the guy that saved you. And so when I'm at work and I don't want to do a good job because I'm angry at my company, well, I should still do a good job because I'm not working for my company. I'm working for God. They're just paying me. But this expands it beyond just working, but in all things. So when I'm walking down the street, I should be walking down the street for Jesus. When I'm driving, I should be driving as unto Jesus. When I am talking to people, I should be talking to people as unto Jesus. Everything I do, I should do as though Jesus is standing right here watching me. Because he is, really. You can't see him, but he can see us. When you're trying to get away with something, you go hide in a cave or you pull a blanket over your head so nobody can see what you're doing. But you can do it. Well, guess what? Nobody else can see you, but God still can. And when I remember that, I might be all alone, but I'm not all alone. It makes it easier for me to remember, maybe that thing over there, I shouldn't go do that. Maybe I shouldn't talk this way to this person. Maybe I should be like this. Maybe I should calm myself down about how this guy's driving. And because of that, we can give thanks to God through Jesus. So we can give thanks that the peace of God is available for all of us. Because without the peace of God, you're going to have a wave hit you in your life, and you're going to capsize, you're going to sink. Some of us might be able to withstand bigger waves than others. But at some point, you're running a risk. The biggest ship on the sea, you could be taken out by a rogue wave. Because they didn't even believe it existed until not too long ago. A 50-foot high wave just overgoes your giant ship. If we have the peace of God, we don't have to worry about that. We know that whatever comes my way, God will carry me through it. Whatever comes my way, God has allowed it for a reason. All I have to do is I don't have to understand the reason. I have to know the reason. I don't even have to like the reason. But I have to accept the reason and say, you know what? For whatever reason, God, you're letting this happen, so I'm just going to trust in you. And just watch how much easier your life gets. You'll still have to deal with stuff, but it's not going to upset you as much. It's not going to tip you over. So, Lord, I thank you for giving us your word, or for giving us your promise, for giving us your peace. And Lord, all we have to do is do as you've commanded us, and our lives will be much more peaceful. I thank you, Lord, for your promise that you will carry us through all things, and that if we are called according to your purpose and doing as you have told us, Lord, if we love you, that you will work all things for our good. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to remember that as we deal with things that we don't want to deal with. So that, Lord, when we hit that rough patch, when that rogue wave is bearing down on us, we can remember that in you we are secure against all things. I pray that you would keep us safe, Lord, this week. Keep a hedge of protection around us. Bless us and keep us. And bring us all back together again next week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.